Welcome back. My guests today are Marc and Cyndi Wilkens, and you are going to be intrigued and love their story and also feel the pain that they've been through. The book is called Shine On, and I was blessed to be able to do the foreword. It was a difficult forward because as I began to get engrossed into your story, I realized that you had faced something that few of us would ever want to face. And Cyndi, thank you for sharing what has gone on. Before I talk to Marc about sort of your role in this, because you've been through this as a couple, Cyndi, we can tell that you have had your arms amputated and as well below your knees.
Yes,
Right.
my feet are amputated.
And so what was the initial reason that this had to be done?
Well, about 7 years ago, I was on maternity leave with my son, who was 3 months old, and our adopted daughter, who was 5 years old, and came down with symptoms that seemed like the flu, but were far more aggressive. Under the impression that it was the flu, I was rushed to emergency, where I presented in renal failure and septic shock, and my kidneys and liver were shutting down. And Marc arrived to the hospital to find out that I had contracted a bacterial infection and that I likely would not make it through the night.
Wow. And so subsequent to that, you actually went into a coma?
They medically induced a coma.
Right.
And I don't really remember much after that.
Yes. And so, Marc, while she's in a coma, you're dealing with all of this on your own, and then it went from bad to worse.
Yes. Just to talk about that night in emergency, the head doctor pulled me aside and said, "We're not sure if your wife's going to make it through the night. We need you to sign off and inducing her into a coma so she can fight for her life. And you should be calling everybody who loves Cyndi and get them down here to say their last goodbyes."
Wow.
And
So in that moment, what were you feeling?
I was just going from moment to moment in shock, really.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. They took Cyndi up to ICU, and I made my phone calls. And I went into the waiting room in ICU, and oddly, it was completely quiet. There was no one in there but me. And a Bible beside me on the table. And at that point in my life, I called myself a Christian, but I wasn't saved. And I looked at the Bible and said, if I'm a Christian and if I need God, which I do right now, and my wife needs him right now, I better start reading.
Wow.
And that's when I started reading the Bible for the first time. And
He doesn't mention that he picked it up and read the book of Revelation first.
Oh, Revelation.
I wanted to get to the ending.
Right.
So I knew,
How does this end?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So you have this epiphany and you awaken to go, I mean, there's nothing like a real crisis, is there, for
Right.
us to go, you know, I haven't prayed to you for a long time, but I'm praying right now.
Right.
And so then you got even worse news.
Right. So a couple days into it, actually, they came back with testing and said Cyndi had necrotizing fasciitis, flesh-eating disease, and that's why her limbs were dying and whatnot. And they actually said that everybody who was in contact with Cyndi over the last few weeks would have to be contacted by me. They would have to be given the specific prescription from their doctors to ensure that they wouldn't get it. And that was on a Sunday. And it was about 3 o'clock, and they said, you need to get your kids to a walk-in clinic right now so they can get tested and so you can get prescriptions. And so I had to rush them over to get the prescriptions. A couple of days later, those tests came back, and my daughter was positive, but thank the Lord that we got the medication to her in time.
Wow.
And no one else contracted it,
Right.
thank God.
And because of this, the doctors eventually told you, we are going to have to amputate.
Correct.
And did you have to make that decision?
I did make that decision. I got a call one night at about midnight, oddly.
Yeah.
I was at home trying to get some rest, and the doctor said, "Marc, we've made a decision. We have to amputate Cyndi's hands and feet, and we need you to sign off on that. We need your permission to do so." And they said it was absolutely essential. They couldn't save any of her limbs.
And as a husband, your wife's in a coma, you're making these big decisions.
Right.
You never thought in life you'd have to face something like that.
It was surreal, the whole experience, for sure.
Right. Did you feel the God that you were now crying out to? Did you feel him close at that time, or was it just
I was still getting to know God, if you will. About 2.5 weeks into Cyndi being in a coma, it was looking really bad. And there wasn't a whole lot of hope around. And I came home one night from the hospital, and we had friends and family looking after our kids. A friend of mine pulled me aside and said, Mark, we've been talking, and we know you have a lot going on. You probably haven't thought about this, but you should think about pulling the plug on Cyndi.
I had had renal failure, kidney, liver, heart failure, and respiratory failure.
Wow.
And it looked like there was a high chance of brain damage.
And
Wow.
these are the things my friend was reiterating back to me. And I, at that point, I never really thought that this was a decision I had to make about my wife's life.
Right.
And I went back in the car, drove to the hospital. It was midnight. They let me into ICU. I'm crying. And I said my first real honest prayer to God, right beside Cyndi on the floor. And I said, God, I need to know if Cyndi wants to live, if she wants to die, if she needs more time, or if I should pull the plug. I need you to tell me.
Oh,
And
what a place to be.
And then the next day, I'm back at the hospital, having lunch with some friends who were visiting Cyndi with me, and my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. And I checked the voicemail after lunch, and it was my mother-in-law, and who never calls me, my sweet little old mother-in-law, and said, Mark, I'm to give you a message. You're going to think I'm crazy, but I've heard voices all morning saying, Cyndi wants to live. She doesn't want to die. She needs more time. Don't pull the plug.
Wow.
And tell Mark. And so I've just told you, okay, bye. And she hung up.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So God was just speaking to you and giving you things. So eventually, Cyndi, you come out of a coma,
Yeah.
and you are told by your husband the reality of the situation. What is the impact on a wife and a mother at that?
Yeah, you would know. The first thing I would think of was my children.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine what I would do. How would I braid my daughter's hair, make them lunches? How would I hold my son in my arms? And I was connected to tubes and wires, and I had to process what my future looked like.
Yeah.
My mother had raised me to believe that God could do anything, and she always had devotionals around the house. And as a little girl, I had fallen in love with Jesus, but trials in life had pulled me away. But in that moment, I knew it was Him that could carry me through,
Right.
and it was Him that I would have to allow to help me overcome.
It's the kind of trial where you know you can't rely on Mark. I mean, what can he do? The doctors, you know, they've done all they can, and you have to survive with a devastating diagnosis and results from all of this.
Yeah.
So you found in your heart, I got to go to God. He's the only one.
It was as if Jesus had walked into the room. I heard the first piece of scripture, which was Psalm 139. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And I was compelled in my heart, this overwhelming feeling that God could have created me for this very moment.
Wow.
And that
Created you for this moment.
to be ready for it. And I knew that if He had created me to be ready for it, and He was the one who was going to carry me through this tragedy, then I needed to let Him do that. And so for the first time at the end of myself, I placed myself in front of Him. And I stopped wondering what would happen and started grieving in faith that He would carry me through.
Wow.
And He did.
And He did, but it was quite a journey. So as you began healing, what were some of the things that you had to deal with as a couple? Because everything changed.
Right.
Your wife didn't have the full use of her arms or her legs.
Correct.
And you, as a woman, had to deal with all of that.
Yeah. There were periods in time where He could only carry me from room to room when I came home on the weekends. And there were so many moments where we would just look at each other crying and saying,
How are we going to get through
this
this?
is so difficult.
Right.
But we took it day by day. And,
Did you ever feel angry at God?
you know, I never felt angry at God for it. I felt sadness, and I felt that, you know, we will get through it. And once I knew God was in control,
That was the key.
that we weren't in control, and that all we could do was put our complete faith and trust in Him.
Right.
it took a lot of the fear away. And it was just, you know, looking for those cues, looking for God giving us the direction that we needed.
I think this gives hope to anyone out there that's facing something that's surely not as bad. This, on the scale, has to be one of the worst things you could go through. Now, there was a point as God was healing you, Cyndi, that just revelations began to come to your heart about your identity and who you were.
Yeah. Yeah, there were many moments, moments in which I knew that if I was speaking this story and telling people about it, that it would have a great impact on them facing trial. And that, you know, it doesn't matter what trial it is, that if we just place our faith in Christ, He can carry us through. And eventually I would learn how to drive, and I would learn how to take care of my children and even change a diaper. And do all the things that a hands-on mom can do. And every day still I have to walk across icy patches. And I need to have Him hold my hand and give me strength in order to do that. So He is with me all the time.
Right. And in a way, you found a reconnection through this tragedy in your marriage even. Like it's all around a miraculous story.
Yeah, we've been very blessed. Our marriage is strong, and we have God in it now.
Yes.
And that's...
I would say it's probably stronger than it was before.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because He is in it.
Well, if that doesn't inspire all of us, thank you for sharing this very, very difficult story. The book is Shine On. I hope you'll pick it up. And you're speaking as well now about this.
Yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm blessed. I know if God can be with this beautiful couple through that kind of tragedy, He can be with me and you through what we're going through. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.